This is Science Friday. I'm Ira Flato. The pandemic has us feeling a lot of things, but what about itchy? Now, here's a situation that has happened to me recently. I headed into the drugstore, so I put on my mask. I went inside, but pretty soon my face started to itch right between my nose and my cheek, about right there, right under my mask. So what was I supposed to do? I didn't want to touch my face or take off my mask to scratch it. That would kind of defeat the point of wearing one, right? It's so difficult to resist that itchy feeling, but I suffered through it till I could get back into my car and safely scratch. The things we do to keep ourselves and others safe, right? Well, how many times has this happened to you over the last several months? And wouldn't it be nice if we could just suppress that itchy feeling? Maybe there's something we could learn from neuroscience to keep us from pulling off our masks to scratch that itch. Well, we're going to talk to an expert here to help explain the science behind our itchy pandemic experiences. And to answer all things itch is our expert, Dr. Diana Bautista, professor in the Department of Molecular and Cellular Biology, University of California at Berkeley. Welcome to Science Friday.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And we want everyone listening to know this interview is being recorded in front of a live Zoom audience because, well, we miss having you being a part of our show. So this is our way of bringing you into our conversation. And if you didn't get to join us this time, don't worry about it. Keep an eye out for announcements of future Zoom tapings so you can participate in our social media or on our website at sciencefriday.com/events. Let's begin right off, Dr. Bautista. Can you relate to the itchy encounter I had? I'm sure it's happened to you, right?
Oh, it happens to me many times a day. We are by nature very itchy animals, human beings, and even just the mention of the word itch, I have to apologize to everyone. You're going to be scratching a lot during this interview. And the idea that you can't touch your face, which we're being told all the time these days due to COVID, is just enough to make you obsess and think about it constantly.
Is there an actual definition of what an itch is? You know, I mean, you think about it.
Yes, itch is defined as a really irritating, unpleasant sensation that triggers a desire to scratch. And it's something that I'm sure we've all experienced from an allergic rash or an itchy wool sweater. So you've all probably experienced that irritation and also that relief you get from scratching that itch.
You know, I've always wondered, why is it that there are some things that make you itch when they touch your body? Maybe it's wool, something like that, and then you have cloth, something that does not make you itch. Do we know why that is?
We know that it varies a lot from person to person. Some people love cashmere and other people find it incredibly itchy. And that touch-evoked itch is also known as mechanical itch. And it actually represents one of the great mysteries in biology. We don't really understand how something like a gentle touch could be innocuous in some cases and really itchy in another.
Is there a relationship between itch and pain? I've heard before that those systems are connected in some way.
Yeah, there is a very intimate interaction between our itch neurons and our pain neurons and how we experience these sensations. And for a long time, it was thought that itch is a subset of pain or a mild pain, but now we know that it's its own sensation, and there are unique free nerve endings in our skin that mediate itch sensations and send signals from your skin to your brain to trigger that sensation of itch, to trigger that negative emotion you have to an itchy sensation, and to drive scratching.
When you say that there are signals sent to our brain, is there an itch center in my brain someplace?
Definitely when you experience itch, there are several regions of the brain that become activated. Our cortical regions that help you identify where that itch is located. You activate the motor system to trigger scratching behaviors. And then there's the emotional component as well.
The emotional component. So there's this, so wait a minute. So it goes to all different parts of our brain, our emotion, our pain, and it's coordinated somehow.
Yeah, it's a very complex, multidimensional experience, just a little itch you get from your mask.
Wow. So if I scratch, are there endorphins, sort of pleasure things released in our brain at the same time saying, oh, that feels good. I'm scratching that itch.
Yeah, scratching is quite complex and interesting to neuroscientists because scratching helps you and makes you feel better in many ways. There's a very local effect of scratching where applying scratching or any type of pain like really hot water or an icy compress, anything that causes pain can literally block that itch signal from reaching the brain or decrease the intensity of the itch sensation. So you get this sort of immediate relief from that scratching. But there's a secondary effect when you scratch. Brain regions that are associated with reward and also addiction release dopamine and serotonin gets released, and you get this big reward from scratching as well. And that can lead to a really horrible itch scratch cycle where it's very hard to stop. And probably people have done this when they've scratched their itchy mosquito bite until it bleeds. It's because of that reward.
Yeah, we have our first Zoom question from Shiro Tanaka, who says, how the itchy sensation defined dermatologically? Is it an inflammation?
Yes, so acute itch is very different from chronic itch. In acute itch, you activate these itch-specific neurons that send an electrical signal to the brain to trigger the sensation and then to trigger scratching behaviors. And it's very short term. With something like a mosquito bite that's a little bit longer, your nervous system actually releases compounds and regulates the vasculature to allow immune cells to come in. And that's really important in the case of, for example, insects that could burrow into your skin that carry disease vectors or parasitic worms. And that immune system comes in, the scratching removes the insect, the immune system gets rid of infected cells, but then this system goes crazy under chronic itch conditions.
Tell me what a chronic itch condition is. Can it be something that really is dermatitis or something on your skin, or is it something that's in your head that you really don't have anything on your skin, or both of those?
Yeah, chronic itch refers to a variety of different disorders and dysfunctions that lead to itch that really can't be treated by antihistamines, and there are very poor therapeutics. And it's itch that is really long-term. So if you imagine the worst itch you ever experienced, and imagine what your life would be like if that itch were to spread over extended parts of your body and were present for every second of every day. And chronic itch has a decreased quality of life similar to the very worst chronic pain conditions.
Are there treatments for these kinds of things?
There are a lot of clinical trials going on right now due to the big boom in itch research over the last 5 years. But right now, corticosteroids are often the first line that are prescribed, but they're really not super effective. And even antihistamines for some forms of allergic itch don't really work. So there's a big therapeutic need out there.
I remember doctors used to tell kids not to scratch their chicken pox, right? If scratching gives you relief, we're often told not to scratch something. I mean, it's sort of counterintuitive to your own mind, but it's bad for you.
Yeah, I think short term there is acute itch serves as an important warning system, right? We feel itchy when we get a mosquito bite. Mosquitoes carry malaria. Learning to associate that itch with a mosquito helps you, develop protected behaviors like putting on DEET or going into the tent when you're camping, when you're surrounded by mosquitoes, or scratching, swatting away. And those are good things, but under chronic itch conditions, the constant scratching causes damage to the skin and makes the itch worse. And so it's really counterintuitive, but anybody who's had a kid who has had eczema knows it's really hard to not scratch that chronic itch. And it's called this really vicious itch scratch cycle that's really difficult to stop.
That's a good segue to our next listener. Lisa Hale has a question about mosquito bites.
Are some people more allergic to mosquito bites? And then if they are, do they tend to itch more than, like, say, someone who isn't?
Yeah, so there's a lot of variation. Some people don't have an allergic reaction at all or notice when they're have mosquito bites. Other people are unfortunate, like myself, who suffered from eczema as a kid, and now I'm super sensitive to bug bites and no-see-ums and mosquitoes, and I have a very large allergic reaction that occurs, and the itch can persist for several days. So there's a great variation depending on who you are and what your biology is.
That's because the mosquito is putting something into that bite, isn't it?
Yes, so mosquitoes, they have saliva that contains things called puridogens or itch compounds, as do plants like poison oak or poison ivy, urushiol. These compounds can directly act on these free nerve endings in your skin to trigger this electrical signal when you have a mosquito bite or get a tick in your arm.
Oh, they know how to do that stuff. Let's go back to my drugstore visit for a second. It was so hard to fight the urge to scratch. I almost couldn't do it. Are there any tricks to overriding these? Can you think about something, whatever to say? Because I always wonder, one of the things I've always wondered about why I could never be an astronaut is, besides a lot of other reasons, is that if I had the helmet and the spacesuit on and I had to scratch my nose or whatever, it would drive me crazy.
Yes, it definitely drives me crazy. And so when I go to the pharmacy or go grocery shopping, I do have a period in my car where I sit there and I touch my face and I scratch, and then I actively think, because we can suppress that strong desire to scratch through, right, we have control over our motor system. It's sometimes hard to exert that control, but we can do it. And so I scratch, I get it out of my system, and I actively think, okay, don't touch your face, don't touch your mask, don't scratch. And I think that distraction is a big part of it. And actually, children with eczema, one of the most effective therapies to get them to stop scratching is through playing video games. Probably educational video games are encouraged to get their minds off of their itchiness. And so that's what I suggest you do at the pharmacy.
So you pre-scratch yourself.
I do.
You give yourself sort of a pep talk before you go in there and say, I'm going to get it out of my system. Now listen, system, I'm scratching now. I'm getting it out of my system, and it listens.
Yes.
At least in your case, it pays attention.
Actively fighting that urge. And one thing people don't realize is how much we touch our face. Our face, because most people primarily use their visual system to navigate the world. We have a lot of innervation, a lot of these free nerve endings in our face that makes it super sensitive, that allows us to be very responsive if a bug lands there or if we get something harmful in our eye. And so we're super sensitive, and we touch our face hundreds and hundreds of times a day without even realizing it.
I'm doing it now without thinking.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that brings me to a question I hadn't thought about until this very moment, and that is why when we touch our face or scratch our face, it feels like a sensation of scratching, but on our soles of our feet, it feels like it's tickling. I mean, you ever thought about that? Is that that's a whole different subject?
Yeah, and it's a fascinating mystery in sensory biology. We know a lot about the senses, but our sense of touch that spans gentle, pleasant touching to itchiness, to tickle, to pain is one of the least understood senses, which is really surprising to most people.
Yeah, yet if I'm barefoot and I step on something, a thorn or whatever, and I scratch the bottom of my foot, I'm not laughing at that point. So my body knows, like you're saying, you're prepped in advance. Your body knows this is not a funny thing. You can scratch it and you won't be laughing about it.
That's right. You can't tickle yourself because a big part of that is the anticipation.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
The anticipation. Okay. We're all familiar, of course, with the experience of an itchy bug bite that you just can't find any relief from. And there are other times you scratch an itch and the feeling goes away. Why are we able to satisfy an itch in some cases, but not in other cases?
Yeah, so the itch relief you get from that temporary pain of scratching or putting on really hot water on your mosquito bite is very temporary. and it's not complete. So you get partial relief, but it's really not enough. When you have chronic itch, that itch is really constant, and the neurons that innervate the skin that send these signals become hyperactive, as well as the brain regions that are processing these signals. The system becomes primed so that it's very difficult to turn off. And scratching as hard as you can, which normally would hurt if you scratch an area of your body that doesn't have that itch, is not providing relief. But you're still triggering some of those reward centers without getting the actual relief of itchy sensations. And that drives this constant damage to the skin and more itch. And that's why it's a cycle that's really difficult to break.
Very interesting. Let's go to our Zoom audience. To Peter Benda has a question. Hi, Peter.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. When you touch your face, it plays a huge role in body language. And I understand intuitively why a fear or a negative thought would trigger a protective hand movement to cover the face. But why does my nose or cheek also itch at the same time?
So our face is innervated by a cluster of neurons called the trigeminal ganglia. And these sensory neurons mediate itch and touch for the skin on your face. They innervate the eyes. They innervate your nasal cavity. And so irritants that might trigger an itchy sensation on your face can also go into your airways and trigger things. You can't really scratch the inside of your nose. And so sneeze is kind of the equivalent reflex as scratching is for your, the exposed surfaces of your body.
Now, some people have this talent. I call it a talent. I remember seeing it in the Odd Couple movie, a famous scene in a restaurant. I don't know if you're familiar with the Odd Couple movie.
Oh, yeah.
Where they're sitting in the restaurant, and one of the characters, can't remember which, or Felix, starts doing this, starts making a noise inside his mouth, and his partner says, his roommate says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm itching the inside of my ear." Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about. And we do experience itch in the back of our throat. Sometimes if you eat something that you're allergic to, people with severe allergies, especially, or sensitivity to pollen or eucalyptus this time of year in California, you can feel itch inside your ears, in the back of your throat, and inside your nose. And the same types of neurons that innervate our skin that respond to different chemical itch compounds can be triggered actually internally. But little is known about those cells. So
it's very embarrassing. I do it. I know how to do it. And when I saw that in the movie, I said, "Gee, I'm not the only one who does that." But it really does work. I can scratch by making that noise, the inside of my ear, and it sort of works. It takes a while, but you have to put up with the slings and arrows of people looking at you. Moving on, I've seen cats and dogs scratch themselves. We all have. How prevalent is then itchiness in the animal kingdom? Do all animals scratch and itch?
Yeah, I think people don't realize that itch is really a highly conserved process and scratching across the entire animal kingdom, because it is really an important protective system that we've evolved to avoid harm. And it's not limited to cats and dogs and humans. Even fish can experience a itch type sensation. They get infected by parasites just like we do. Of course, they can't scratch themselves. So what they do is they'll rub against coral to try to get rid of that and get some relief. Or some fish will go to cleaning stations in the ocean where there are small fish that come in and actually bite them and remove those parasites. And in addition to fish, I think this also surprises people. Even insects can be infected. So even flies can be infected with mites. And they also have very behaviors that look a lot like scratching, where they actually can rub and remove mites from their body.
I've seen the fish itch. I used to have a little coral reef tank, and I would see some of the fish dive into the coral sideways, like swipe it a little bit. You know, it's like a bear rubbing his back, his or her back on a tree to itch it.
Right.
Oh, I said, look, the fish is doing the same thing, and bears, other animals, do it like you say.
Yeah, as a itch biologist, I definitely spend my vacations looking at itchy animals and finding, it's just interesting the creative means that we'll go to scratch that itch on the back, right? Some people have used like their spatula in the kitchen or their hairbrush to reach that itch that you just can't ignore.
And it's usually in the same place, a lot of times it's in the same. Is there a reason, or is it part of your skin that's rough there, or why would it be there?
Yeah, some people have hot spots. I definitely have one at the back of my neck that comes every winter, and it was an area where I had eczema as a kid, where I don't have it, but it just pops up. Or we have skin areas that are sensitized. It could be from a previous injury or a rash or a bad area where you had a lot of chicken pox. That's ultra sensitive now.
Interesting. Okay, you sound like you know a lot of, well, you certainly do know a lot about itching, but there's got to be some stuff you still want to know about. What do you still want to know about?
Yeah, one of the big questions that we're interested in is understanding mechanical itch. What is it about that itchy sweater that gets you, or the itchy mask? We really don't know. We know a lot more about chemical itch. The other big question that really, I think, is shocking that we don't know more about are switches, very quick and in some cases quick to turn on and long-lasting changes in normal sensitivity. So for example, when you have chronic itch, a gentle touch that's normally pleasant or innocuous becomes itchy. But if you have chronic pain, that gentle touch becomes painful. How do these normal sensations that we just take for granted really switch? And it could be really debilitating, where if you constantly feel the itch from the weight of your clothes, or chronic pain from a gentle touch or caress. And we really don't know how these switches occur and why we're seeing these chronic conditions at really crazy high rates across the world population. These are normal protective systems that warn us against burning ourselves or avoiding toxic plants that now are just turned on all of the time. And we are really interested in this.
Yeah. I have one last question, because I'm wondering if, because we're talking about itching, everybody's itching now. I mean, when we talk about yawning, we say yawning is contagious, right? You see somebody yawn, you want to yawn. If you see somebody itch, do you feel like, I've got to start itching something too?
Yes, itch is a very powerful sensation, and it evokes a very strong emotional response. And so just watching somebody scratch, hearing the word itch, seeing a picture of a bug on somebody's arm can induce a very robust desire to scratch. And interestingly, human psychophysical studies and brain scanning has shown that just seeing somebody scratch or seeing that bug on the arm triggers a lot of activation in the same brain regions that you get when you actually have a mechanical itch on your arm. And so it drives that desire to scratch, and you get that reward, even though there's absolutely nothing going on at the level of your skin.
Well, you have driven me to try the Diana Bautista method of talking myself out of scratch. I so want to scratch this part of my shoulder now that you've talked about it, but I'm not going to do it. It doesn't itch. It doesn't itch. Thank you, Diana. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
And I know we have just scratched the surface of this topic, so we'll come back and talk with you more. Dr. Diana Bautista, professor in the Department of Molecular and Cellular Biology at the University of California at Berkeley. And you can watch the entire video of this interview and sign up to find out about sitting in on a future Zoom interview on our website at sciencefriday.com/events.